Also, that the bank would move to its new quarters on the north side of the square and would be known as the Missouri State Bank, which was where the Butler State Bank is located today. We now had 150 members. On May the 4th, 1889, a communication was read from Rich Hill Lodge number 479, inviting Butler Lodge number 254 to assist them in laying the cornerstone at the M.E. Church on May the 7th, 1889. Their invitation was accepted, and the lodge went as a body to Rich Hill for the ceremonies. At the 15th session of the Grand Chapter of Missouri Order of the Eastern Star was held in Carthage in 1889. In the worthy Grand Patron's report, he recommended that a charter be granted to Rob Morris Chapter UD with 70 petitioners who were to meet at Butler, Bates County, Missouri. Upon his recommendation, Rob Morris Chapter UD was instituted in our hall late in 1889. Later, it was officially chartered as Rob Morris Chapter number 178, Order of the Eastern Star. Butler Lodge number 254 paid Dr. Morris's expenses incurred while here in Butler instituting said chapter to the amount of $4. This was something new for the brethren, having women in the lodge hall. Several members of our lodge petitioned the chapter for membership, and it enjoyed a nice attendance for some time. Several of the brethren who were members of Butler Lodge 254 but resided in the Foster area appeared the night of January the 7th, 1890, and requested demits so that a new lodge could be established in Foster. They said some of the brethren living in Foster but belonging to Rich Hill Lodge number 479 were taking the same action. They also requested both lodges to establish a line of jurisdiction for the new lodge. Their second request was for Butler Lodge 254 to recommend to the Grand Lodge that a dispensation be granted to establish the Foster Lodge. The second request was acted on first. However, it was held up until the line of jurisdiction could be established by both Rich Hill Lodge number 479 and Butler Lodge number 254. This delayed issuing their charter according to the minutes of this lodge and the proceedings of the Grand Lodge session until October the 15th, 1891. Early in 1892, Butler Lodge 254 was notified that Rob Morris Chapter number 178, Order of the Eastern Star, had surrendered its charter. Therefore, the hall was no longer needed. Here is a little notation in the minutes of April 2nd, 1892, that would seem a little odd today. A committee of 3 consisting of brothers W.M. Page, O.D. Austin, and F. Dearester were appointed to confer with the electric company, which was privately owned, in regard to placing some incandescent lamps in this hall. Apparently there hadn't been any hurry on the part of the lodge to avail themselves of the new idea of lighting, because since 1881 the cupola of the courthouse above the lodge hall had been lighted up and people could see it for miles. In the opinion of the committee, the cost was prohibitive and recommended some other source of lighting be investigated. So the committee was released. I'm sure all of us have heard the old expression, "That's certainly one for the books." Well, here's one taken from the minutes on May the 18th, 1894, which I think definitely is one for the book. It should have been printed in all the local newspapers, because if ever our lodge tried to prove it was behind every worthy community effort, this was one of many. The minutes of that night state, and I quote, that Brother Austin made some remarks about the Oddfellows' home proposed to be located at this place, Butler, and moved that Butler Lodge number 254, AF and AM, donate the sum of $100 to assist in securing the home, which after being discussed and put to a vote was carried unanimously. End of quotation. There may be instances within the state where the Masonic lodges work in close harmony with lodges of other orders, but I doubt very much if there is another town or city in this state, or for that matter in any other state, where 2 lodges of different orders have worked so closely together where genuine friendship and brotherly love have existed between the two lodges for 100 years, like we have enjoyed here in Butler between Butler Lodge 254 AF and AM and Base Lodge 180 IOOF. Being a member of both orders, this to me is the ultimate in lodge relations. By October 1895, the courthouse began showing signs of falling apart, and some of the brethren felt that they should build a new hall. So a committee was appointed to confer with Brother H.B. Panzer about building a second story over his new store for a lodge hall. The H.B. Panzer Furniture and Funeral Home was a frame building located at the corner of Main and Chestnut Street, where the Butler Maytag is today. The committee reported that Brother Panzer would build a second story over his store and rent it for lodge meeting. They were instructed to proceed with their negotiation and report back. By the next meeting, Brother Panzer had changed his mind and withdrew his proposition. According to the Oddfellow minutes, their committee had met with the county court relative to having the south wall of the lodge hall reinforced. After several weeks, the court notified both lodges that a contractor would make the necessary repairs, and to the amazement of everyone, the court would pay the bill. Since the flag of our country was not in evidence, the lodge decided to purchase two large burning flags. One member of the committee worked at the Bates County National Bank, so the bank presented the lodge with one flag. The other one cost $3.50. At the Grand Lodge session in 1896, Brother Flevis J. Taggart, a member of our lodge and the seventh man to serve as master, was elected Deputy Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of Missouri. To celebrate the event, they had a 3-day school of instructions with the Grand Lecturer and 3 other Grand Lodge officers here at our lodge. The lodge paid their expenses at the Palace Hotel, also their taxi fare to the depot. The entire bill was $11. The dues were still $1.50 per year. After Brother Flevis J. Tiger became Deputy Grand Master, the lodge felt they would be out some extra expense in the next 2 years, so they tried to raise the dues back to $2, but it was defeated. The problem of lighting came up again. The committee investigated some of the new gasoline lights which were being used here in town. The cost as well as their safety was uppermost in their minds. On December the 19th, 1896, when the brethren came to lodge, they found 2 gasoline chandeliers had been installed. A brother Morrison from Rich Hill was the agent for gasoline lights and informed the lodge each chandelier would cost $15. Everyone was amazed at the amount of light they provided. At their next stated meeting on January the 16th, 1897, the judge of the county court and the lodge's insurance agent found it convenient to meet with the brethren. The agent produced a ruling in writing from his company which said, "It is the opinion of the company that gasoline is not yet considered safe for lighting purposes. In view of the above opinion, the company has no alternative but to cancel your insurance." The judge was a little more temperate with his remarks. He informed the brethren that as of that week, the county court had met in special session to consider the advisability and safety features of using gasoline for lighting purposes in public-owned buildings, or more specifically, in the lodge room, which was located on county property. He said the fact that all major insurance companies discouraged the use of gasoline for lighting purposes because of fire hazards and other reasons, the court had voted unanimously to ask the lodge to have the chandeliers removed at once. Otherwise, the court would have to review their lease with the lodge, perhaps finding it necessary to cancel said lease. He praised the brethren on the appearance of their hall and warned them not to let their wives find out what good housekeepers they were, or they might find themselves with less leisure time at home. One of the brethren asked His Honor if that too was a ruling of the court. The judge replied, "No, I have fulfilled my duty as an elected official. I now speak as a private citizen and a member of this lodge." Needless to say, the chandeliers were removed. Things went along about as usual through the year 1897. The south wall had been repaired, and the brethren felt everything was in readiness for the big year ahead. At the 1897 Grand Lodge session, Brother Taggart was elected Grand Master. The focus of attention from all over the state was on Butler. A reception and banquet was held at the Palace Hotel, honoring Grand Master Taggart, with the Grand Lodge officers coming from different parts of the state. This too must have been quite an affair, because the Palace presented the lodge with a bill for $29.80 for the banquet and one night's lodging of the Grand Lodge officers. In the local newspapers appeared the following resolution, which was unanimously adopted by the lodge on November the 20th, 1897. Resolved that Butler Lodge number 254, AF and AM, appreciate the honor of having one of its members elected Grand Master of the Masonic Fraternity of the state, and we feel it to be our duty to uphold of Brother Taggart, Grand Master, in all that he may do to advance the interest of Masonry and the elevation of the standards of morals in every way we may be able. End of quote. At this same meeting, which was just 5½ years after the gasoline light episode, the subject of lighting came up again. A committee was appointed to investigate the cost of electric lights. They reported on December the 4th, 1897, that the electric light company would wire the hall, put in 8 lights, furnish the meter, and would charge 65 cents per light per month. Or they would wire the hall, furnish the light meter, the lodge paying for all fixtures, and the charge would be 50 cents per light per month. As a third alternative, if the lodge would have the hall wired, furnish the wire and fixtures and meter, estimated cost at $35, they would furnish electricity at the rate of 1 cent an hour per light. Then the question of acetylene lights came up, but was never acted upon. After some discussion, it was decided that the cost of electric lights was prohibitive, and the master was asked to discharge the committee, which he did. It was decided to have another public installation for the 1898 officers. So December the 28th, 1897 was selected as the date. The lodge extended an invitation to the wives and families of both the Masonic and the Oddfellow lodges to attend. Grand Master Taggart installed the officers in due form, after which the minutes state that some 200 sat down to an elegant banquet, listening attentively to the music furnished by the Oddfellow Lodge. This was the first time in the history of our lodge that the Grand Master of the Grand Lodge had installed the officers of this lodge. The second time was 65 years and 1 day later, December the 29th, 1962, when I was installed by the then Grand Master, Brother Martin B. Dickinson, in almost exactly the same circumstances. The officers had hardly gotten used to their new responsibilities when the petition of Brother A. H. Culver, the father of the late Ed Culver and Sister Nina Culver, came before the lodge. His was a welcome addition to the lodge, because soon after having received the 3rd degree, Brother Culver was to be one of our most efficient secretaries for 12 years. Early in 1898, there was talk of the courthouse being condemned. As I was unable to locate the Oddfellows minute books from 1897 to 1901, it is not clear where they moved to, but apparently they had moved out or was in the process of moving in late February 1898, because the minutes of Butler Lodge number 254 mention getting some furniture out of storage we need. End of quote. Another thing that would substantiate my thinking as being correct was the fact that Carnation Rebecca Lodge number 238 of the Independent Order of Oddfellows was about to be instituted here in Butler. According to the minutes of Butler Lodge number 254, they, the Rebeccas, were experiencing some difficulties in finding a place to hold their institution and subsequently their meetings. Butler Lodge number 254 extends the ladies an invitation to use its hall. End of quote. Their invitation was accepted because on page 1 of their original number 1 minute book, we find, and here I quote, "Through the courtesy of the Masonic Lodge, Carnation Rebecca Lodge number 238, IOOF, was instituted on March the 2nd, 1898 in their hall and held their first meeting there. End of quote. In the minutes of their second meeting, we find arrangements have been made to use the Oddfellows Hall. I do know that Butler Lodge number 254 continued to meet in the courthouse until December the 16th, 1899, when past Grand Master Brother Tigard officially notified the lodge that the courthouse had previously been condemned and declared not safe for habitation. Therefore, the lodge would have to move. The minutes of January the 6th, 1900 read in part as follows. The lodge opened in the Knights of Pythias Hall in the Conklin building on the south side of the square. That's where the pool hall is now. Courthouse having been declared unsafe. End of quote. The lodge adopted a resolution accepting the invitation of the Knights of Pythias that we meet in this, their hall, until other arrangements can be made. And the thanks of Butler Lodge number 254 are hereby extended to the Knights of Pythias for their kindness and courtesy. End of quote. The first order of business was to appoint a committee to find another hall to rent. It was unanimously agreed that this committee meet with similar committees of the Oddfellows and try to work out arrangements where both lodges could meet jointly in the same hall. Everything not needed was moved from the courthouse and once again stored in Brother Pancher's store on North Main Street. It seems that sometime between 1895 and 1900, Brother Pancher had torn down his one-story frame building and built a modern two-story brick building. Because on January the 20th, 1900, Brother Pancher presented the lodge on one of his letterhead statements in his own handwriting the following proposal, and I quote, Butler Lodge number 254, AF and AM, Butler, Missouri. I will rent you the room over my store and sufficient room below to gain access to the same for $150 per year, to be occupied by the Masonic Lodge only, or for $200 per year, provided it is occupied jointly by the Masons and Oddfellows. You to bear all the expense of preparing the room as you require. I to be at no expense whatever. Signed, H.V. Pancher. End of quote. This statement can still be seen in Minute Book number 4, page 105. Viewing this building today as it was after 1900, you will note that the Pancher building was not only where Butler Maytag is, but also where Harwick Chemical Company is. The upstairs portion of the Harwick Chemical Company was the room offered the lodge. Brother W.M. Ross, one of the chairmen, reported that Brother Maines, a stockholder in the Butler Improvement Company, had advised him that they could not spare room on the east side of the square over the Deacon Brothers store, where McGuire's supermarket is now, for the lodge's use. On the west side of the square, where Missouri Farm and Loan Company is now, a small frame building owned by James C. Clark and Brother F.J. Tigard, known as the Warner Building. They offered to build a second story over it and rent it to the lodge for $300 per year. Some of the brethren felt that the committees were not taking enough time in securing a hall, so it was moved and seconded that an additional time from 30 to 60 days be afforded the brethren so that the best possible lease could be secured. When it was put to a vote, the results were 16 for and 16 against. So the master cast a deciding vote in favor of the motion, and it carried. North Main Street was the latest addition to the business district and by far the most desirable location. At their meeting on February the 3rd, 1900, the committee reported that Brother Pancher had withdrawn his offer and left only the Warner Building on the west side of the square to be considered. Several of the brethren expressed dissatisfaction with the Warner Building for two reasons. One, the rent was too high for one lodge to pay. Since the Oddfellows were already located, they would not be in favor of moving where the rent would be considerably higher. And number two, The west side of the square was considered the cheap part of the business district and was not befitting a lodge hall. So they turned down the offer by Brothers Clark and Tigard. Brother A.L. McBride, another member of the committee, reported that he had been in contact with a Mr. Max Weiner, who had recently purchased the building of a business of Joe Myers on the east side of the square. Old pictures of the east side of the square show a two-story brick building situated where the First National Bank is and the north portion of Levi Mercantile Company, or the men's department. Across the front canopy is a sign which reads M.S. Cables and Company. The south part of this building was where Mr. Weiner had his store, and it was the upstairs portion being offered to the lodge. The rent would be $100 per year, and it would be available for 3 years. The lodge to stand the expense of remodeling. By a close vote of 17 to 16, the lodge voted to accept his offer, but not to sign a lease for any given length of time. At a cost of $13.20 for remodeling, they moved out of the Knights of Pythias Hall and held their first meeting in the new hall on February the 17th, 1900. But the hall committee was not released. They continued to look for some other place to meet which they thought would be permanent. On April the 21st, 1900, the hall committee made a report that got immediate action. They reported that Duval and Percival, well-known businessmen of their day, would rent the two center rooms upstairs of the Pace Block, where McGuire's Grocery, Billington Hardware, and Associated Natural Gas Company is, which was owned by the Butler Improvement Company, to the lodge for $5 per month. Or they would make the same space available to Butler Lodge number 254 and Bates Lodge number 180 for $8 per month. Both lodges to stand the expense of remodeling, their estimate of the cost not to exceed $50 per lodge. So 3 committees were appointed, one to confer with Duval and Percival, one to have the lodge carpet and furniture cleaned, and the third to contact the Oddfellows with reference to both lodges renting the hall. The Oddfellows instructed their committee to work with the Masons in securing the hall. When the carpenters were done, the hall was in the center of the Pace Block, or just above Billington's hardware store. They moved into the new hall and had their first meeting on May the 19th, 1900. The following bills came before the lodge that night. Max Weiner rent for 3 months and 9 days, $20.50. A.H. Culver, cleaning and moving the carpet, $14.72. Duval and Percival, remodeling, $73.73, a total of $108.95. The question of having moved to the new hall was endorsed by a unanimous vote, but the hall committee was instructed to take up the matter of $23.73 with Duval and Percival and report within 60 days. The other bills were allowed. On June 16, 1900, Brother J.C. Clark reported that the committees had actually seen the carpenter's bill and that it had cost Duval and Percival additional money to get the repairs made. The bill was allowed. The master said, "Maybe this will keep us in good graces with the Butler Improvement Company." Everyone felt so good about their new hall that the lodge was closed, and every member and visitor went to Charlie Andrews' restaurant for refreshment. The Andrews restaurant was on the east side of the square where the discount store is now. Once again, the Masons and Oddfellows were meeting in the same hall. But what amazes me is the fact that during the 6 months plus, from January the 6th till June the 6th, 1900, they moved into 3 different halls, had to completely rework 2 of them before they could be used. Still, they found time to entertain 6 petitions, conduct 8 proficiency examinations, initiate 7 candidates, pass 5 to the Fellowcraft degree, raise 4 to the Sublime degree of a Master Mason, contribute $10 to a needy brother's family, and in their words, write off a worthless $200 note. As if that wasn't enough, during the same period, they conducted the funeral services for Brother Wesley Kipp father of the Master Elmer Kip. There have been periods in the history of this lodge when they didn't do that much work in 3 years. Prior to leaving the courthouse on April the 3rd, 1890, Canton Mount Pleasant No. 20, Patriarchs Militant of the Oddfellow Organization, was instituted and was meeting in our hall. This is a semi-military branch of the order, and its members are uniformed. Still operating on $1.50 per year's dues, the subject of raising them back to $2 came up on October the 20th, 1900. At a later meeting, the motion was voted on and finally carried, the raise to take effect January the 1st, 1901. By now, the old courthouse had been torn down and a new one, which is the present one, was taking shape. On May the 4th, 1901, a committee of 3 was appointed with the power to make all arrangements for the cornerstone laying. Brother Francisco, the master, was chairman and asked Brother A.L. Fox, E.D. Kip, and Harry Cannon to serve with him. On the same day, a special meeting had been called for the purpose of conducting the funeral services for Brother W. Eldridge. The lodge had rented 2 teams and buggies for the day from E.J. Williams' livery stable. When the bill of $5 was presented to the lodge, they reduced the amount to $4. The reason? It seems one of the teams was a bulky team and was late in getting to the cemetery. But they immediately set upon the idea of getting a set price for such services and appointed a committee to contact the various livery stables and report. The report was that George L. Smith would convey members and their families to the cemetery and back for 25 cents per member. But the E.J. Williams stable submitted the idea of using a bandwagon as a wagonette, carrying 14 to 16 passengers, and he would charge $2.50 per trip. So the lodge voted to accept Mr. Williams' proposal. On July the 20th, in 1901, a letter was received by Brother F.J. Tigard, stated that the contractor would be ready to lay the cornerstone of the present courthouse in October. On September the 21st, 1901, the lodge met in regular session. A committee consisting of Brothers W.M. Ross, J.D. Allen, and A.L. Fox had drawn up a resolution of respect for our late brother, William McKinley, President of the United States. Brother McKinley had been assassinated in Buffalo, New York on September the 6th, 1901, and died 8 days later. The lodge adopted the resolution and not only made it a part of their minutes, but had it published in the local newspapers. Finally, the big day arrived for the cornerstone laying. The minutes of October the 10th, 1901, state that the Grand Lodge met in special communication, where the master stated the occasion for the meeting. Brother Cameron Wells acted as Grand Master, Brother R.S. Stevenson acted as Grand Senior Warden, and Brother W.F. Kuhn from Kansas City acted as Grand Junior Warden. A procession was formed and marched once around the public square, then to the foundation of the new courthouse. Brother Kuhn delivered a most excellent address immediately after ceremony of laying the stone. The lodge purchased a copper box for $1.50, which was deposited back of the cornerstone in the wall. It contained the Constitution and bylaws of the Grand Lodge, names of officers of Butler Lodge No. 254, and the county officers, and the same coins used in the 1869 courthouse stone. Butler Lodge No. 254 had just got settled in their new hall when the Knights of Pythias had to vacate their hall. So their lodge contacted the Masons and Oddfellows in regards to renting their hall. We had not forgotten the courtesy their lodge extended to us when we were searching for a meeting place. Our secretary sent a letter to the Oddfellows Lodge recommending they extend the hand of friendship to the Knights of Pythias. Arrangements were worked out to the satisfaction of everyone, and the Knights of Pythias moved into our hall. Early in 1902, Mount Pleasant Chapter UD, Order of the Eastern Star, was instituted in our hall. When they expressed their desire to pay rent, the lodge voted to make our hall available to them free of charge. The Oddfellows voted likewise. So Mount Pleasant Chapter number 203 Order of the Eastern Star was chartered on October the 31st, 1902. According to their minutes and the proceedings of the Grand Chapter of 1903, their worthy matron was Sister Jessie Cassidy, and the worthy patron was Brother W.F. Hemstreet. Several of the brethren immediately petitioned the chapter for membership. Many familiar names appear in their minute book, such as Harry Cannon, Charles Dixon, A.B. Ludwig, W.W. Ross, Rudolph Talbert, O.D. Austin, and many more. On April the 19th, 1902, arrangement was made to send Brother Van Buren Van Dyke, a charter member and the first secretary of our lodge, to the Masonic home in St. Louis. The lodge voted to advance Brother Van Dyke $10 to pay his expenses. On July the 19th, in 1902, our lodge appointed a committee to help solicit funds to aid in the erection of a monument to President McKinley.
With only 15 seconds left, we pause here to turn the tape. Play side 2 of this tape.
And the subject of electric lights came up again. So committees from Butler Lodge 254, Base Lodge 180, and the Knights of Pythias were appointed to meet with the City Council to see if the lodges could get a reduced rate. The City of Butler had purchased the electric light plant in 1900. The Council agreed to offer them the same rate as business places. So they had the hall wired and put in electric lights and fans, all costing $51.46. On February the 7th, in 1903, the mitts were granted to Brother Clarence Catron, John Lyle, and W.F. Hill, and on a motion, certain brethren were recommended to the Grand Lodge as proper persons to form a new lodge at Amsterdam, Bates County, Missouri. However, the problem of jurisdiction had to be worked out with the lodges of Butler, Foster, Adrian, and Drexel. This must have taken some time, because according to the Grand Lodge Journal, Amsterdam Lodge number 141 was not chartered until September the 27th, 1906. Perhaps it operated under dispensation for some time. Butler Lodge number 254 still dreamed of the day when we would own our own hall, jointly or otherwise. On April the 16th, 1904, a committee was appointed to confer with the Oddfellows relative to buying a lot and building a hall to be jointly occupied by both lodges. Brother J.C. Clark, A.B. Ludwig, and J.Y. Whitsitt, the secretary, was our committee. The Oddfellows Committee wanted to incorporate and form a corporation where shares of stock could be sold. That way the lodges could purchase the pile block, which is where the Inn Hotel is now, build a hall, and have some lot to sell for business purposes. This was agreeable with Butler Lodge number 254, and they actually sold some shares. But before they could close the deal for the property, the Fraternal Inn Association was formed, and the pile block was sold to them. On May the 21st, 1904, the trustees of our lodge were instructed to buy stock in the Fraternal Inn Association to the amount of money they had in their hands belonging to the lodge. By a vote of the lodge, the dues was raised on July the 2nd, 1904 to $3, except those who are exempt, that's 50-year members. On December the 17th, 1904, the petition of one Wesley Benton for the degrees was received by the lodge. The Masonic and Oddfellow lodges were instrumental in getting the third floor of the Fraternal Inn building so designed as to accommodate the two lodges, yet be in separate halls. By now, each lodge had become affiliated with other branches of their respective orders until the hall was somewhat congested. Along with the Masons was the Royal Arch chapter, the Eastern Star chapter, the Council, the Royal and Selected Masons, and the Commandery. With the Oddfellows were the Encampment, the Rebeccas, and the Patriarch Militant. Then later the Woodman and Royal neighbors were to petition the Oddfellows to use their hall after they got moved into the new hall. And we still had the Knights of Pythias with us. That made 15 organizations meeting in the same hall. As one brother in our lodge said, to call a special meeting you had to sit up until after midnight or call it for Sunday morning. Brother Wesley Denton was initiated and entered apprentice on January the 25th, 1905. Work on the Fraternal Inn Hotel progressed to a point to where the lodge began to think of having to move again. On April the 7th of 1906, the master appointed Brother W.M. Ross, F.C. Smith, and A.B. Ludwig to confer with the Oddfellows in regards to jointly laying the cornerstone at the Fraternal Inn building. In those days, they had what was called Deputy District Masters, which was the forerunners of District Deputy Grand Master. Brother Ross was the Deputy District Master in this district, so he was instructed to proceed with formulating the ceremony to lay the cornerstone with the Oddfellows. First, the secretary obtained a dispensation from the Grand Master to move to the new hall. Then they practiced the ceremony of laying the cornerstone and also that of dedication. The committee of both lodges made arrangements for opening the new hall. Bates Lodge number 180 bought 1,500 souvenir coins to be passed out the day of dedication. It seems the contractor was not ready for the cornerstone laying, so the lodge trustees were instructed to draw up a lease with the Fraternal Inn Association. On June the 7th, 1906, a special meeting was called to consider the lease. After some changes, the lodge voted to accept the lease as corrected. Since they were going to have a nice new hall, the lodge felt that maybe they should have a new carpet, some new chairs, and new window blinds. Butler Lodge number 254 proceeded to move into the new hall and held their first meeting before dedication or laying of the cornerstone on October the 6th, 1906. Brother A.H. Culver was appointed Marshal of the Day for dedication. Even though the cornerstone is dated October the 26th, 1906, it was laid on October the 25th, 1906. The minutes of Butler Lodge number 254 and of Bates Lodge number 180 for October the 25th, 1906 are almost identical. Both lodges were called into special session at 2:30 p.m. First the lodges was opened and then turned over to the Grand Master. Grand Master James O. Hogue of the Grand Lodge of Masons stated the purpose of the meeting was to lay the cornerstone of the Fraternal Inn building, also that of dedication. And I now quote from the Butler Daily Democrat of October the 26th, 1906. At 3 o'clock Thursday afternoon, the members of the two orders assembled at the halls and forming a line paraded around the square to the sweet notes of music furnished by the Butler Concert Band. The parade was a most credible one, and large numbers of both societies were in line. The parade halted at the east entrance of the hotel building, where the ceremonies attending to the depositing of the box in the cornerstone was held. The program was brief but impressive. After the invocation by Reverend H.J. Crockett, there was a short address by James O. Hogue, Grand Master of the Masonic Lodge, and then the copper box was placed in the receptacle prepared for it. In this box are the following articles: Butler Lodge number 254, AF and AM, a book of constitutions, and the cards of J. O. Hogue, Grand Master and architect of the building, Dr. H. M. Cannon, Reverend H. J. Crockett, Frank H. Cole, J. R. Engel, W. M. Lyle, Dr. J. M. Norris, T. B. Embry, and a souvenir coin of the Portland, Oregon Exposition, and the bylaws of the lodge and a list of its membership. Bates Lodge number 180, IOOF, a copy of the Triple Link, a copy of the Missouri Oddfellow, a copy of the Butler Daily Democrat, and a copy of the Bates County Democrat, and a copy of the Republican Press, a copy of the Grand Lodge Constitution, a copy of the local bylaws, a list of the members of the lodge, and a souvenir program of the 23rd Annual Encampment of the Grand Army of the Republic, the Missouri Division, donated by M.S. Clay. After the ceremonies at the Cornerstone, the members of the two orders assembled in their respective halls where the ceremonies of dedication took place. These ceremonies, of course, were witnessed only by members of the order and were somewhat similar. In the Masonic room, James Oliver Hogue, Grand Master, presided. In the Oddfellows room, Lucius J. Easton, Grand Master, presided. End of quote. The Oddfellows minutes state that at 7:30 p.m. that evening, they attended special services held at the Methodist Church, where the Grand Master and Grand Secretary delivered very impressive talks. I now quote again from the Butler Daily Democrat. After the meeting at the church, a reception was held in the new halls, and during the evening more than 1,200 were present. The halls were brilliantly lighted, and in each, as well as in the anterooms, handsomely gowned and lovely young ladies dispensed delicious punch. The Allen Orchestra was present and furnished splendid music during the entire evening. The halls, the furniture, the paraphernalia were all fully inspected by the visitors, and each one was loud in praise of the pretty home-like rooms. The proverbial goat, which was looked for by the ladies, but was nowhere to be found. There were many out-of-town visitors, and each one was confident that two prettier or better arranged rooms could not be found in a day's travel. The Grand Lodge officers were particularly well pleased with them and were hearty in their congratulations and commendations. End of quote. This is perhaps the only building in the state, or for that matter anywhere, where the Grand Masters of two different orders worked side by side, laying the cornerstone. At their next meeting on November the 3rd, 1906, the bills started coming in. Brother A.H. Culver of carpet, rugs, and oilcloth, $233.46. Windows, shades, and chairs, $63.10. Laying of the carpet, $13.05. B.F. Roseman for painting lodge chairs, $10. Bennett and Hupp, 250 foot of room molding and varnishing, $7.50. John Ray for setting up stove and pipe, $1.50. Butler Light Plant for wiring, lights, and installing meter, $11.20. A.H. Culver, one-half expense of dedication, burning, and so forth, 1906. Brother Culver paid half of this bill himself, with a total of $359.41. At their next meeting, Brother George E. Cable was elected and installed master. Of course, he was the first master in the new hall. They got a telephone installed and gave the Eastern Star free rent. Since moving over the hotel, a new bill appeared each month, a water bill. Even though a franchise had been granted a private company in 1890 to pipe the town and build a standpipe on Mill Street, the lodge had not availed themselves of this new service. Now the city bill had an extra charge of 25 cents. The brethren were sad to learn that Mount Pleasant chapter number 203, Order of the Eastern Star, had surrendered their charter on January the 8th, 1907. The first degree work performed in the new hall was on February the 2nd, 1907, when Brother Wesley Benton was passed to the degree of Fellowcraft. He was also the first candidate raised in the new hall, which was on March the 8th, 1907. On December the 27th, 1907, Butler Lodge number 254 and Miami Royal Lodge chapter number 78 held a joint installation of officers. According to the minutes, a large crowd was in attendance, about 200. They were entertained with musical numbers, followed by a banquet. The blueprints for the hotel called for a partition in the middle of what we used to use for a banquet room. Each lodge used the space for a reception room. After the joint installation of officers on December the 27th, our lodge felt this partition should be removed and this area used as a combination kitchen and banquet room. The committees of both lodges agreed, so it was removed. This explains why there was two sets of double doors leading from the banquet room into the hallway. Our meeting night was listed in the hotel directory downstairs, so several brothers visited us through the years. On April the 28th, 1908, our brother in the Masonic home, Van Dyke, died. He will be remembered as our first secretary of the lodge. The town of Butler had other reasons to regret his passing. According to the obituary printed in the local papers and in the St. Louis Globe-Democrat, Brother Van Dyke was a famous character in Butler and was almost the first settler in town. A native of St. Clair County, Alabama, and coming to Bates County in 1855. He located in Butler when there was little else but prairie grass. Brother Van Dyke was a surveyor and assisted R.L. Duncan, then county surveyor, in locating and plotting the town of Butler. In 1866, he was elected county surveyor. His years with the Masonic fraternity went back to 1858. He is kindly remembered by people in Butler and Bates County who will be sorry to learn of his death. Since the lodge had agreed to stand the funeral expenses of Brother Van Dyke, a check was sent to H.M. Alexander Funeral Home in St. Louis for $72. It was about this same time that the lodge had made application to the home for one of our brothers and his wife. The home rejected the application on ground that did not seem normal to the lodge. So they voted to pay the expenses of Dr. A.C. Robinson, the home physician, to come to Butler and make his own examination. It cost the lodge $17, but the old couple was admitted. Brother O.D. Austin reported that Brother Henry C. Donahue, the first candidate initiated into our lodge on August the 10th, 1867, had passed away in his home at Appleton City, Missouri, on October the 3rd, 1908. The lodge voted to send 4 brothers representing our lodge to his funeral. The Appleton City Lodge conducted the services. At the 1908 Grand Lodge session, it was voted that all lodge dues was due and payable in advance, effective January the 1st, 1909. This caused some inconvenience for the brother, but our lodge lost only 2 members because of it. The celebration of St. John's Day had always been a big day for the lodge. June the 24th, 1909 was no exception. According to the minutes, and I quote, the craft was formed in procession in front of the lodge hall entrance under the guidance of Brother O.D. Austin, the marshal, and marched to McFarland's Grove. There they had a basket dinner, then installed the duly elected and appointed officers of Crescent Hill Lodge number 368 at Adrian and of Johnstown Lodge number 350 in a public ceremony. The lodge was saddened by the death of one of its members November the 23rd, 1909. The Honorable David A.D. Orman, who had served as circuit court judge here in Bates County, was elected congressman from this district, perished with his grandson in a fire at his own home. The House of Representatives of the United States Congress recessed the day of his funeral and sent a delegation from Washington to represent the House and to pay their respects. Many lodges, not only in Missouri, but from all over the nation, sent resolutions of respect to our lodge and to his family. In the minute of October the 15th, 1910, I found the answer to a question which I had been asked many times. Of course, everyone knows there is a sidewalk from Main Street to the cemetery. The question asked me was, when was this sidewalk built? According to the minutes of Butler Lodge number 254, the sidewalk was built entirely by contributions. Our lodge voted that if the walk was built as per present plans, 4 feet wide, we would contribute $25 towards the cost. So it was started, and on April the 1st, 1911, a warrant was issued for the $25, which was our pledge. On January the 29th, 1911, Our lodge laid the cornerstone of the old high school at Havana and Pine Street. We also paid for the inscription on the stone. The minutes say that members of the lodge, the school board, and the teachers met in front of the Fraternal Inn Hotel on the Ohio Street side. Then, led by the Butler Silver Cornet Band, marched to the corner of Havana and Pine Street where the cornerstone was laid according to the customs of our ancient institution. The lodge also paid the band $12.50 for their services. Our lodge was called into special communication on April the 5th, 1911, to conduct graveside services for Brother F.J. Tigard, our seventh master of the lodge and so recently Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of Masons of Missouri. Brother Tigard passed away at the Memorial Rest Home in St. Louis, where he had resided for some time. The minutes state that the craft was formed in procession near the lodge hall entrance. Under the direction of the marshal, they marched to the depot where the train arrived from the north at 12:30 p.m. From there, the body was taken to Oak Hill Cemetery, where it was placed in the Tigard Vault with the ancient honors of our order. The Tigard Vault is near the Pine Street entrance at the cemetery. Just about this time, the lodge purchased its first electric sign, and it was proudly displayed over the stairway entrance on the east side of the hotel. On December the 2nd, 1911, Brother F.C. Smith offered a resolution to the bylaws which would change the regular time of election of officers from the first meeting night in December to the first meeting night in June. This resolution was passed on January the 6th, 1912, and our bylaws were revised accordingly. But the Grand Master ruled that they could not have their first election in June 1912. Rather, it must be held for the first meeting night in December of that year. The officers elected then could serve only 6 months. So on December the 21st, 1912, Brother H.O. Maxey was elected to serve until July 1913. On June the 21st, 1913, Brother Wesley Benton was installed master of our lodge. We now had 123 members. Early in 1914, the Grand Lodge was building a new Masonic home in St. Louis. According to the minutes of April the 4th, 1914, the Grand Master requested that Butler Lodge number 254 be represented. Brother Wesley Benton, the master, was sent with all expenses paid by the lodge. It cost the lodge $20. On May the 11th, 1914, Butler Lodge 254 worked with Rich Hill Lodge number 479, the Elks Lodge of Butler and Rich Hill, and the Oddfellow Lodges of Butler and Rich Hill, to conduct the memorial services for Brother William B. Weeks. Brother Weeks, being a member of the above-mentioned lodges, had lived in Butler several years. The funeral was held in Butler, but interment was in Rich Hill Cemetery. By the time Brother Denton had completed his term as master, he was appointed District Deputy Grand Master of this district. On June the 20th, 1914, he installed Brother C.A. Burt Allen and the other officers into their respective stations and places. But at the July 18th meeting, Brother Allen informed the lodge that before its next meeting, he would be living in Colorado. Immediately, he tendered his resignation as master. On October the 17th, 1914, election was held to elect a new master. After the voting was over, Brother Wesley Benton found himself back in the master's chair. On March the 6th, 1915, the lodge was saddened by the death of Brother O.D. Austin. Even though he was not a charter member of our lodge, he came by way of demit on May the 30th, 1868, and had served it well for 47 years. On July the 19th, 1918, the lodge voted to send 2 brothers, C.E. Culver and James A.D. Orman, as representatives of our lodge to the state capitol building at Jefferson City, where they witnessed the cornerstone laying of the new capitol building. We now had 139 members. Soon after that, we had a cornerstone laying ceremony right here at home. It was at the county infirmary, or the county home as we know it. On November the 27th, 1915, a special meeting was called to consider buying the stone and paying for the inscription, which we did. With the help of all the lodges in the county, the stone was laid on December the 6th, 1915. There were 56 members of the order present. Our membership had grown to 147 by January the 1st, 1916, and there was degree work at all stated meetings, and some special meetings were needed. In the latter part of 1916, they tried to raise the dues from $3 to $4. On September the 16th of 1916, the motion was lost by a vote of 18 to 16. It required two-thirds vote in favor to carry. At this same meeting, Brother Henry Donovan became the first member in the history of Butler Lodge No. 264, AF and AM, to receive a 50-year pin. Since this called for a celebration, the brethren retreated to cigars. The first mention of the use of automobiles by the lodge was in December 1916. It seems a funeral had been conducted here in Butler for a Brother Harrison Philbrick, and burial was in Rich Hill. Quoting from the minutes, the cars were furnished willingly and cheerfully by Brothers F.H. Crowell, L.C. Schubert, Julius Levi, Wesley Denton, and Frank Clay at their own expense. The lodge is under a debt of gratitude to them for this comfortable and easy means of transportation. Shortly before his death on April the 4th, 1917, Brother John M. Vaughn, one of our members, presented the lodge with a picture of George Washington. Actually, this picture has some history back of it. Here I quote from the minutes. The Worshipful Master called attention to the picture of George Washington hanging to his left, which very recently Brother Vaughn had presented through him to the lodge. This picture has been in Brother Vaughn's possession almost 60 years and had been brought from Virginia by his aunt, who was 17 years old and was the first cousin of Thomas Jefferson. End of quote. So this year, 1968, this picture is over 111 years old. On May the 3rd, 1917, Brother John Steele, our first senior warden and the last surviving charter member for our lodge, died. Scattered through our minute books are many elaborate resolutions of respect to our departed brothers. I would like to read next to the last line of the one written for Brother Steele, which I'm sure meant a great deal to his family, and I quote, "But now and hereafter we extend to them the friendship and ready assistance in time of need, which our order teaches and our brothers so well exemplified." End of quote. Then came the bicentennial celebration. By now, Butler Lodge No. 254 AF and AM was 50 years old. The secretary used 3 pages in the minute book, typewritten, to describe this event. Here I offer you a brief summary of the happenings of that day, June the 25th, 1917, which may be found on pages 144 and 145 of minute book number 6. Brother C.E. Culver was master, and his father, Brother A.H. Culver, was secretary. Members of the order were here from Butler, Pattonsville, Johnstown, Rich Hill, Adrian, Rockville, Foster, and Hume, which comprise our district. Then they came from Bonner Springs, Kansas, Perryville, Indiana, Pittsburgh, Kentucky, Higginsville, Missouri, El Dorado Springs, Missouri, Oak Hill, Kansas, Miami, Oklahoma, Craig, Missouri, Columbus, Kansas, Blackburn, Missouri, and Pleasanton, Kansas, and Lacey, Kansas. The members and their families assembled on the courthouse lawn for a basket dinner. During the dinner, they were entertained by the Butler Concert Band. After dinner, they all marched once around the public square, led by the band, then to the circuit courtroom, where, as the minutes say, a very pleasing program was rendered and 2 most excellent speeches were made, and Reverend E.K. Wolf. A brief history of the lodge was read and a prayer offered by Brother Talbot. End of quote. At 7 p.m. that evening, members of the order met in our hall for the purpose of raising 2 candidates to the sublime degree of a Master Mason. Brother F.L. Bailey of Amsterdam was the first candidate raised. Then Brother Arthur M. Huffman of Rockville was next. After many speeches from the visiting brethren, lodge was closed. At their next meeting on July the 7th, 19 and 17, the Bicentennial Committee reported a total expense for the celebration to be $51.78. A bill was allowed. On September the 26th, 19 and 17, we laid the cornerstone at the Baptist Church here in Butler. This must have been quite an occasion because the minutes say, and I quote, "Members of the lodge along with Mayor O. A. Heinlein and the City Council, led by the Butler Concert Band, marched to the church which was located at the northwest corner of Delaware and Pine Street, where the ancient ceremony of laying the cornerstone was carried out. Those present were entertained by a quartet composed of Mrs. S. F. Ferris and her two sons, and Miss Marguerite Snyder, with Mrs. W. E. Black at the organ." End of quote. On December the 15th, 1917, it was voted to raise the dues to $4. On June the 1st, 1918, during the First World War, the Bates County Food Administrator asked the lodge to stand behind the government in its attempt to conserve the wheat of our country. The lodge heartily endorsed the course recommended by the County Food Administrator. We pledge the unqualified support of our membership to this and all patriotic objects, but, and I quote from the minutes, the lodge demands of its senators and representatives that the use of grain, sugar, cars, and labor used by the brewers be prohibited during the time of national need. End of quote.
With less than 50 seconds left on this side, and because the conversation being such that it would be hard to break in order to play the next tape, we will pause here to continue the history of our lodge. Please play side 1 of tape number 3.